we are especially honored to have present uh, poets from Mumbai, from Dehradun, from Dhaka and Bangladesh, uh, even from Shantiniketan, and the most important thing which we are all thrilled about is that our president, who on her way to Spain, delegate to the International Conference on Tagore, and she is the keynote speaker. And she had left Calcutta to go to Spain, and in Delhi somehow she's been able to join us, and it is really thrilling that our president, our vice president, both are here with us, and I do request all of you to join me also in wishing Uma all our best wishes on a journey to the West. So westward ho, Uma, and every good wishes from us. She is not having a good internet connection. Uma, are you able to? Would you be able to? Now that you are on?
Why don't you kindly go ahead, Basant? Because I'm still sort of not very certain about the connection. Just kindly go ahead. Obviously, I'm very happy to be here, joining this poetry adda, as always. So I welcome all.
Thank you, Uma. Thank you very, very much. Our Vice President Krishna is also here, who knows American literature better than I think anyone else in Kolkata. We have with us our poet who had been our guest in March, Shyamashri Ray Karmakar, and she had volunteered to introduce to us the poetry of John Crowe Ransom. And it was Shyamashri who had been also her student recently in Calcutta University. So, Krishna, would you like to say some words to greet her?
Thank you very much, Basant. I join all of you in wishing Uma all the best at the conference. I know that she will make a wonderful presentation on Tagore. And also a very warm welcome to Shyamashri Ray Karmakar, my student Shyamashri. She was one of our poets and now she's one of our presenters, and that makes us very, very proud. Welcome, Shyamashri. We are very happy to have you. And especially because you're talking about, yes, it's really good to have you. And it's very interesting that you're talking about John Crowe Ransom. I remember when I was teaching in Vermont in 2002, there was this very big conference on American styles of theory and criticism, and I was on the panel for new criticism. And I had to talk at length about John Crowe Ransom. And while I was researching that, I read a bit of his poetry, but I must say I did not go deeply into it. John Crowe Ransom, Cleanth Brooks, Alan Tate, Robert Penn Warren, they started off this very, very dynamic school of criticism known as New Criticism, which went quite sharply against the romantic mode of reading poetry, which included going into the biography of the poets. And the new point that John Crowe Ransom and others made was, no, you must just look at the poem. Don't mix it up with the biography of the poet. Only the words on the page must move you, not the life the poet led. And this was a very, very revolutionary statement at that time, because everybody was used to this romantic mode of reading and going into the poet's life and the poet's philosophy of life and all that sort of thing. But John Crowe Ransom was a very important person in the early 20th century. But I'm very, very happy today, Shyamashri, that you're going to talk about him as a poet. Even I don't know much about John Crowe Ransom as a poet, although I've written on him as a critic. And this is one of the great pleasures of Srijan's poetry adda, isn't it? That the familiar, that the unfamiliar becomes familiar and the familiar becomes unfamiliar. So a familiar critic is now going to be presented as a poet. Welcome, Shyamashri. We are looking forward to hearing this presentation.
Thank you very much.
A presentation like this, which we have done for the last many, many years. In fact, we have covered nearly 100 international poets. Nearly every Nobel Prize winner who has especially got a prize in poetry. Today, on the 30th of April, was born this great poet, John Crowe Ransom. And as Krishna was saying, he was a critic, but hardly anybody knew him as a poet. This paying the tribute is a sort of a reciting an anthem for us. We call ourselves a temple which worships poetry. And for us, paying such a tribute, thinking about a poet who has been born in that month, and learning for a whole month, reading him, learning as much as we can about this new poet we have chosen for the month, gives us such a thrill. We get enriched a little more about with the poetry. This is the poem I'm going to skip through to get a mood into the poet of which Shyamashri is going to present to us. Is this poem, and is a poem about God published in 1916. This is the poem which you see on the screen. Is a lovely poem which he did not have an intention to write as a collection in his poems about God. It's a brilliant piece. I've just copied the 2-3 verses for you to give you the feeling of how he treated God. And as you see in the first few paragraphs, he says things about God as being conceived by his father. For example, he says, "My good old father tucked his head, his face the color of gingerbread. Over the table my mother had spread, and folded his leathery hands and said, 'We thank thee, Lord, for this thy grace, and all thy bounties to the race. Turn not away from us thy face, till we come to our final resting place.'" And he says, "For me, it is his kindness reaching down to me." That kindness is reaching down to us today. And Shyamashri is going to take you across the journey of John Crowe and how he began to, how his poems became so beautiful. You will see it in a while. Shyamashri is, of course, you all know, Shyamashri, of course, a lover of poetry, is now the editor-in-chief of the bilingual magazine, Sahitya Ekhon, and has been a co-editor of journals like Krittibash Potrika and Bodh Patrika, etc. And I invite her to take over, please. Thank you.
Remembering a poet always becomes special when we realize that even though 100 years have passed, his poems not only enrapture us, but push us to the edge as well. It is indeed an honor to pay tribute to a poet like John Crowe Ransom on his 135th birth anniversary. Ransom was a poet, educator, scholar, critic, essayist, magazine editor, and professor. He was the leading theorist of the Southern literary renaissance that began after the First World War. He was born in Tennessee on 30th of April in 1888. His father, John James Ransom, was a Methodist minister. A child of highly literate family, Ransom had the opportunity to read his family's library. He often engaged his father in passionate discussions. He published 5 main books of poetry, 4 books of essays, and edited 3 anthologies. Ransom was homeschooled until the age of 10 and entered Vanderbilt University at 15, graduating first in his class in 1909. Ransom was selected as a Rhodes Scholar. He attended Oxford University's Christ Church, where he read Greeks, as the course in Greek and Latin classics is called. Ransom was appointed to the English department at Vanderbilt University in 1914. During the First World War, he served as an artillery officer in France. After the war, he returned to Vanderbilt. In 1920, he married Rob Reville and raised 3 children. In 1937, Ransom accepted a position at Kenyon College in Ohio. He was the founding editor of the Kenyon Review and continued as editor until his retirement in 1959. In 1966, Ransom was elected to the American Academy of Arts and Letters. He breathed his last on 3rd July in 1974. Ransom's literary reputation is based chiefly on 2 collections of poetry, Chills and Fever, which was published in 1924, and 2 Gentlemen in Bonds, which was published in 1927. Believing he had no new themes upon which to write, his subsequent poetic activity consisted almost entirely of tinkering his earlier poems. Hence, Ransom's reputation as a poet is based on the fewer than 160 poems he wrote and published between 1916 and 1927. In Ransom's best poems, every part is subordinated to the whole, and the whole is accomplished with astonishing exactness and thoroughness. Their economy, precision, and restraint gives the poems sometimes an original yet impersonal perfection. And sometimes their phrasing is magical, light as air, soft as dew, the real old-fashioned enchantment. The poems satisfy our nostalgia for the past, yet themselves have none. Ransom's poems profess their limitations so candidly, almost as a principle of style, that it is hardly necessary to say they are not poems of the largest scope or the greatest intensity, but they are some of the most original poems ever written. Just as Ransom is one of the best, most original, and most sympathetic poets alive, it is easy to see that his poetry will always be cared for, since he has written poems that are perfectly realized and occasionally almost perfect. Despite the brevity of his poetic career and output, Ransom won the Bollingen Prize for Poetry in 1951. His selected poems, published in 1963, received the National Book Award the following year. Ransom was noted as a strict formalist, using both regular rhyme and meter in almost all of his poems. There is an interesting story about how his first volume of work, Poems About God, saw the light of the day. After writing 3 or 4 poems that year, Ransom was duly surprised to notice that each of them made considerable use of the term God. He then picked up the term, which was according to him the most poetic of all terms possible, and composed more poems accordingly. It was poet Robert Frost who recommended Ransom's poems to the publisher. I would now like to read out few poems of Ransom. In his earlier poems, Ransom tried to give a sense of the concrete situation and the particular setting, out of which abstract ideas would emerge, best demonstrated by the opening lines of the poem, The Ingrate. By night, we looked across my field. That tasseled corn was fine to see. The moon was yellow on the rose and seemed so wonderful to me that with an old provincial pride, I praised my moonlit Tennessee and thought my poor befriended man would never dare to disagree. Just look at the words that he has used. Tassel corns, the yellow moon. What a beautiful image to begin with. A master wordsmith, isn't he? A frosty man with furtive eyes seared in the flames of horror. And I remember how it looked, dear God, my country of the snow. The same provincial pride here. Don't we all have that? Let us listen to another poem from Poems About God. One Who Rejected Christ. It is a satirical poem and a very strong one. The title itself arouses our interest. It provokes us. There's farmers and there's farmers. There's many a field and field, but none of the farmers round about can haul such harvest wagons out as I from an acre's yield. There's plenty and plenty of farmers that leave the ground by the fence, thinking it's nice if a patch of roses should scratch out the hay and tickle their noses with nice little wild rose scents. A very good thing for farmers, if they would learn my way, for crops are all that a good field grows, and nothing is worse than a sniff of rose in the good strong smell of hay. What makes us amazed is that he has used the word rose as Christ, for Christ. He is rejecting rose. And the title of the poem is One Who Rejected Christ. So he is rejecting Christ and he is rejecting rose. They are similar. He doesn't want to worship any fancy Christ. Undoubtedly, for an early 20th century poet, One Who Rejected Christ was a very bold poem, especially when we know how John Lennon's More Popular Than Jesus was greeted with an angry reaction in July 1966. The beauty of a Ransom poem is that it never fails to amaze you. It never seems old. Sharp, smart, and modern. These are the three adjectives that depicts a Ransom poem. He was a big critic of free verse. I would now like to request Basantji to read out one of Ransom's unique poem named Dumbbells. This poem was published in 1919 and was included in Poems About God. Basantji, please, if you.
Thank you, Shyamashri. Again, it's a pleasure. If you have that poem on your screen, so you'll be able to read yourself. But let's read along. Dumbbells right, dumbbells left, dumbbells right. Swing them hard, grip them tight. 30 fat men of the town must sweat their filthy paunches down. Dripping sweat and pumping blood, they try to make themselves like God. Imagine here he brings in the element of God, which, as Shyamashri had said, was something spontaneous which happens when you come upon some anything, whether it is food or exercise. So he goes on, dumbbells up, dumbbells down, dumbbells front, dumbbells down. 30's God has just the girth to pull the levers off the earth. They make him sinewy and lean and washed him glittering white and clean. Dumbbells in, dumbbells out, count by fours and place about. Goodbye dumbbells for today. Wash the stinking sweat away and go out clean, but come again. Worships every night at 10. Thank you.
Thank you, Basantji. The fugitive days differ from the Poems About God, as in Philomela. You will find that there are three characters from Greek mythology: Procne, Philomela, and Itylus. Procne was the wife of King Tereus, while Philomela was Procne's younger sister. After Tereus raped Philomela, the two sisters turned into singing birds. While fleeing from Tereus, Procne turned into swallow. Philomela turned into a nightingale and began singing her songs of sorrow. Itylus was the daughter of Pandareus of Ephesus. She was mistakenly killed by her own mother. Later, Zeus relieved her mother's grief by changing Itylus into a nightingale. Procne, Philomela, and Itylus, your names are liquid. Your improbable tale is recited in the classic numbers of the nightingale. Ah, but our numbers are not felicitous. It goes not liquidly for us. All the three characters, this Procne, Philomela, and Itylus, they are sad characters, unfortunate characters. But Ransom finds them otherwise. Why does he find so? Philomela, Philomela, lover of song, I have despaired of thee, and am unworthy. My scene is prose. These people and I are earthy. Unto more beautiful, persistently more young, thy fabulous provinces belong. Look how he says, my scene is prose. The speaker's life has nothing to do with the fancy tales, just like in One Who Rejected Christ. The next poem, Bills for John Whiteside's Daughter, was first published in The Fugitive, Volume 3 in 1924.
There was such speed in her little body and such lightness in her footfall. It is no wonder her brown study astonishes us all. Her walls were bruited in our high window. We looked among orchard trees and beyond, where she took up arms against her shadow or harried unto the pond. The lazy geese, like a snow cloud, dripping their snow on the green grass, tricking and stopping, sleepy and proud, who cried in goose, alas. For the tireless heart within the little lady with rod that made them rise, from their noon apple dreams and scuttle goose fashion under the skies. But now go the bells and we are ready. In one house we are sternly stopped to say we are vexed at her brown study lying so primly propped. Thank you.
As we have already found, it is a short poem about a little girl whose tireless heart finally gives out. Her friends are vexed at her brown study, lying supremely propped. Mr. Ransom explained this phrase, saying, we all must face things like death and go on. A little the wiser and better for having done so. This underlying philosophy accounts for his choice of the word vexed. And the attitude reflected in the next poem, Here Lies a Lady. This poem was published in Literary Review in 1923. Here lies a lady of beauty and high degree. Of chills and fever she died, of fever and chills. The delight of her husband, her aunts, an infant of 3, and of medicos marveling sweetly on her ills. She was such a sweet lady that even the medicos were impressed by her. She was a creative lady, we find, always snipping the waist laces. She must be very quick at it. That's why the maze. But was she not lucky? In flowers and lace and mourning, In love and great honor we bade God rest her soul. After 6 little spaces of chill and 6 of burning. Here Lies a Lady is one of the most popular poems composed by Ransom. The poem inevitably reminds me of Alexander Pope, the master poet and craftsman of satire. As we can see, this poem is a piquant commentary on the clash of reason and sensibility. Here, the speaker is surrounded by a group bound together by a sense of ceremony. The people around her deathbed act out of a sense of love and great honor. And yet, their ways are measured in symmetry and balance, as is the way in which the lady has died. I was going to request you to read the Survey of Literature.
Okay, let's do it fast. It's a since this is a literature evening, the
Yes.
Survey of Literature is a poem which all of us will enjoy laughing at, and of
Yes.
course in the deep meaning of it. Fill in the poem, which you can see. It says, in all the good Greek of Plato, I lack my roast beef and potato. A better man was Aristotle, pulling steadily on the bottle. I dip my hat to Chaucer, swilling soup from his saucer, and to Master Shakespeare, who wrote big on small beer, and etc., etc. Wordsworth, Tennyson, Milton, Shelley, what have you, Keats. And then he says, God have mercy on the sinner who must write with no dinner, no gravy and no grub, no pewter and no puff, no belly and no bowels, only consonants and vowels. Thank you.
Sinner with dinner, Keats with pickled beets. A fantastic poem. Let us read the sonnet. Here's a piece. This poem is not simply the best known, but is probably also his finest experiment in the sonnet tradition. I am a gentleman in a dust coat trying to make you hear. Your ears are soft and small, and listen to an old man not at all. They want the young men's whispering and sighing. But see, the roses on your trellis drying, and hear the spectral singing of the moon, for I must have my lovely ladies soon. I'm a gentleman in a dust coat trying. But what grey man among the vine is this, whose words are dry and faint as in a dream? Back from my trellis, sir, before I scream. I'm a lady, young in beauty, waiting. The pathos in Piazza Peace emerges clearly in the colorlessness of the girl's future. The dust coat worn by the grey man is a coat of death and decay. The fading roses, the ghostly moon, and the death figure strips the girl's world of its color. This poem could have been comic were it not so creepy. Basantji, will you please read Two Gentlemen in Bonds?
Okay, we'll quickly go through this because, of course, you know that it is from a collection of 20 sonnets. So I have put down a little bit about the whole entire tale because 20 sonnets is like 200 lines, and in which we'll probably read from the first one and the last, where it's a tale of two brothers. One of them is very worldly, large, athletic, extrovert, active man with delights in nature. Second is Abbott, who's his own brother, but who's thin and pale and intellectual, absolutely different than Paul. At the end of the sequence, of course, the father wakes up, whose estate these two people have inherited, and he is so ashamed to see that none of them are actually worthy of that estate. through this is the first sonnet in which it describes about the two brothers. One, Paul, pink and dozing and stood forming and cool from within. Digestion was assisted after lunch, roast, etc., etc. And second, Paul's brother Abbott, his legs were two long straws. His face was chalk. He would not ride, nor run, nor drowse, but walked the world in thought, more passionate than another's. And who won't believe that the two such men were brothers? And then in the last sonnet, which is out of the 20 sonnets, it's Weep or Sleep, in which the poor father says, he wakes up from his sleep. He sees the condition of these two sons of his who are no good, one on one side of the fence, one on the other side. And he says, now I remember life, and out of me lawfully leaping the twin seed of my loins, brethren, who no split fatherhood disjoins, but in the woman house, how hatefully they trod upon each other, till now I see my manhood halved and squandered, one head, one heart, each partial son despising the other's part. But so it is, and so all their lives it will be. This, at the end of the sonnet, seriously, I felt that Ransom has come back to feeling that the head and the heart. Paul is representing the heart, and Abbott is representing the head. And neither the head is doing well, nor the heart is doing well. And I do remember when I read this, is one of his beautiful pieces, which I thought Shyamashri will say a thing about, but I would seek her permission to take you to Equilibrist. This is again, it was first called History of Two Simple Lovers. Now, the head and the heart, which he spoke about, his father was crying, waken up from his grief, was the head and the heart. And this is a poem where the head and the heart fall into an equilibrium. And he despises that from within. He says, how can the head or the heart fall into an equilibrium? The two lovers, it's the history of two simple lovers. He says, full of her long white arm and milky skin first. And then he says, mouth he remembered, the quaint orifice from which come heat that flamed upon the kiss. On the one side, the flaming kiss from the mouth. And then cold words came down, spiraling from the head. The head cools him down completely, he forgets the mouth. Similarly, body. It was the white field ready for love. On her body field with the gaunt tower above. Then the tower above is that stupid head. And if he could pluck them and wear them, bruise and break. And then he comes to see, my God, none of these, whether it is the heart or the head, they come into sort of an equilibrium. And it is surprising because he then comes to a page where he finds that neither the heart nor the head is winning. And he says, the strict lovers, they are ruined now. I cry in anger, but with pudent brow, devising for those gibbeted and brave, came I descanting, man, would you have? What would you have? Now, the words in this, if you will notice, beautiful words, which make this sort of a jigsaw puzzle, where he uses words like gibbeted, a kinder seculum begins with death, where the whole span of life beginning with death. And then he says, sublimed away, the body is sublimed away, your male and female tissues sweetly shaped, sublimed away, blown up into ashes, into vapor. And in the next verse he says, great lovers lie in hell. In heaven, you have heard no marriages, no white flesh tender to your lecheries, your male and female tissues sweetly shaped, sublimed away, and furious blood escaped. That's the heaven. And in hell, great lovers lie in hell. The stubborn ones infatuate of the flesh upon the bones. Stupid, they rend each other when they kiss. And the pieces kiss again, no end to this. Remarkable, where you have to think about the word rend, meaning, tear into pieces. And then you come to see how those pieces kiss again, and there's no end to this, because after kissing, they also tear to pieces. So it goes on, and until he looks at them and he says in his epitaph, and he says, equilibrists lie here. Equilibrists lie here in this tomb. Stranger, tread light. Do not tread hard. Tread light. Close but untouching in each other's sight. Mouldered the lips and ashy the tall skull. Let them lie perilous and beautiful. So this fight between the head and the heart is all the time in this poet. And thanks to Shyamashri, I was able to enjoy him. Otherwise, you would have just not been able to expose to the beauty of this poet at all.
Thank you. It seems few lyric poets have been quite so persistent and so radical in their exploration of poetic situation, and none of them is as playful as Ransom. I pay my humble tribute to him. It was an honor to be a presenter and to be able to pay tribute to him, a poet like him. And now after this program, I would love to go back to Ransom and read him again and again. Thank you all.
Thank you, Shyamashri. It gives me great pleasure that a young lady like Shyamashri had taken us along this journey, and we have our own poet, Debasish Lahiri. Unfortunately, he's written to me that his camera is not working properly. So I do not know whether, Debasish, are you able to show yourself now? Oh, okay. So he's able to join. I'm so glad you're able to, because I was afraid what the hell is happening. How do we have the anchor today? But I'm so glad you have joined. Debasish will carry this evening forward from now. As you all must know from the chapbook I have sent you, we had prepared it with diligence. And please, if you still have that chapbook with you, you just go through the biodatas, the presentations. I wouldn't call them biodatas, but just short introductions to these great people we have today. And of course, Debasish, we are very proud of you with all the books of poetry you have written, with your poetry being translated into France by such lovely translators and poets like Christine. And two of your books we are waiting so passionately, both your books coming out this year. I believe, as you, I think, said that your second book will be probably beating the race and come before your previous book, which is being printed in the UK. So we are waiting for both your books. Please, we do take pride in presenting our loving poet Debasish Lahiri, who has been an enthusiastic member of Srijan's team for a very long time. Please take Debasish, take this lovely basket which is in your hands.
Thank you, Basant. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. And since we are still in April, the last day, it's not out of place to have a Shakespeare quote to begin off things, by saying that I do feel lapsed in time, although not in passion. And without further ado, actually, I would want to begin the series of readings on this evening of exceptional poets from different languages who have gathered together. And as I said, the word tardy comes to mind as I look at the watch, and I wish we had more time. So I would be requesting all our invited poets to limit themselves to 5 to 7 minutes, which is again, a crime to kind of tell a poet to limit. I mean, can you tell the sun, please give us that much light only? So again, without further ado, I would begin this evening's proceedings by inviting Ranjit Hoskote. Good evening, Ranjit. I'm a great admirer of your poetry. I mean, this is the writer of Central Time, Pale Ancestors, John Whale, a man of many parts, actually, and one must understand that he has a very influential and powerful role as a curator, an art critic, and a lover of the arts. And his poetry is suffused in art. I personally favor this ekphrastic attitude, this communication between different art forms that you will find in his poetic language. He needs no introduction to anyone who has any idea of what modern Indian poetry is doing and where we are headed. So without further ado, without taking any more of your time, it started raining outside, by the way, just as a little ray of hope, we might say, in this hot and sultry season. It's just started raining. So the rains will arrive, I think, this evening via Ranjit's poetry. Ranjit, it's over to you.
Thank you so much, Debasish. It's really a privilege to be here at Srijan. I also want to thank Basant and Anjana for the invitation, and it was marvelous to open the evening with this meditation by Shyamashri on Ransom's poetry. It sort of cues us to why we all come back to the poetic word and why it continues to fascinate us in these ways. And also, I'm particularly happy that this is a multilingual occasion. It reminds us that no language can be sovereign, that every language has its own epiphanies to offer. So it's very much in that spirit that I'll read perhaps 3 poems. I'm very aware of the clock too. Since there was a discussion of God and the presence of the divine, I thought I might begin with a poem called Pilgrim. And it goes like this. Did I ever think heaven would ripen its doors before their right season, expecting me to arrive any day now, my boots caked with mud, my coat weighed down with rain, my lips moving to sounds not tethered yet to chance, more hostage than pilgrim, telling my story in bursts, how I let rivers surge through the trenches, how a thrown knife pinned me to a farewell, how I shrugged myself loose and ran, a banner rippling in and out of air, my hands burning with colors I'd scrounged off rocks, shrubs, spiky trees. On my way here, leaving my palms on outcrop and leaf, my soles on creased water. The second poem that I'll share is just called Table. Thank you. Table. Always make place at the table for the guest who walks in with a peony, who's exchanged his drawl for a twang, who once sliced the moon in half with a whistle, who struck a vein of gold in his sleep, who goes red in the face laughing at his own jokes, and for the guest who left the house 40 years ago with a wooden bowl and a vow of silence. One brings you a charter of demands, the other a chaplet of sky flowers. Thank you. And the third poem I'll read is called Saturday. And it's an attempt really to try and bear witness to everyday figures who once we met in the streets and who increasingly we don't. This is a very particular, perhaps it's only a Bombay figure, a person dressed in peacock feathers and smeared with vermilion, who seem to bring you news from another world. And now they've all been exiled by urbanization. But anyway, Saturday. The man who is Saturday arrives smeared in vermilion. his one good eye bloodshot, his other eye in geostationary orbit. He plays two roles, the man who is Saturday. He's the comet rushing down the street, skirting the edge of luck. He's the dancer on the island, misdirecting the traffic with a genial wave and a pointing finger. He ends the week with a kind of thunderclap you'd think was the monopoly of the rider on the grey horse, waving his sword of fire, wagging his fan of peacock feathers, exploding nucleus of this honkahedron day, the man who is Saturday.
Debashish, I would request Ranjit to read one more poem, a very good poem I had fallen in love with when I first purchased his book, Jonah Whale. And that is a poet's life. It was like reading, a literature, study of literature by Ransom. And this is another aspect, Ranjit. I would really appreciate if you could read this for us.
Sure, definitely. In that case, I'll switch plans and I'll conclude my part of the reading with the poet's life. Some of those details are even accurate. The poet's life. He married birdsong. He sailed to the Black Island. He survived gunshots. He wore a sweatshirt under his linen jacket. He talked to parrots in Greek. He excavated lighthouses by night. He asked to be paid in paper money. He counted up the day's syllables before dinner. He wished the balloons hovering above the docks were Chinese lanterns. He called out to the spirits of drowned sailors. He walked down to the sea with the town's fishermen. He painted their gray nets in grainy gold on the beach. He picked up ridged violet shells and blew wet sand from them. He avoided striped red and white blinds on summer mornings. He avoided the roasted facades of brick buildings on summer afternoons. He noticed the oranges in the fruit stalls were shrinking. He remembered in detail the railroad town where he was born. He collected the rust and shadows that gather on aging metal surfaces. He licked his stamps himself, the envelopes addressed in green ink. He glued the spout back on the broken chocolate teapot. He opened the door to the deck and prayed the tree would burst with apples. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ranjit. I really would have preferred you reading the miniature poems, miniature painting poem. Anyway, whatever the plan may be, it was a brilliant rendition of your lines. And as I said, it makes at least me feel greedy for more. But then again, there is this, harpy that's sitting somewhere up on my back saying, it's time, Mr. Elliot, Mr. Elliot. Thank you so much for lighting up this evening, really, and setting a wonderful standard for what is to come. More wonderful poetry, I'm sure, on its way. And those who are listening, we have, I would want to call Pawanji, who is a wonderfully fine poet, especially with a very perceptive and a sensitive eye on issues like love. I've heard him recite both in Hindi and in Urdu at Srijan's earlier addas. So without further ado, to all Srijanites, a very familiar, an illuminating figure, a figure of great wit. May I invite Sri Pawan Maskara to read to us, regale us this evening. Pawanji, it's all yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. आज सृजन की इस महफिल में मुझे बतौर उर्दू शायर बुलाया गया है, इसलिए मैं कुछ गजलें आपके सामने पेश कर रहा हूं। पहली गजल मुलायजा फरमाइए। कि जानो दुनिया निसार करते हैं, निसार कहते हैं सैक्रिफाइस करते हैं, जानो दुनिया निसार करते हैं, मुफ्त में लोग प्यार करते हैं। अब तो है दुश्मनों से ही उम्मीद, अब तो है दुश्मनों से ही उम्मीद, लोग अपनों पे वार करते हैं। 100 निगाहों के दरमियां आशिक 2 निगाहों को 4 करते हैं। दिल के टुकड़ों को जोड़ते हैं लोग, सारी दुनिया करती है। दिल के टुकड़ों को जोड़ते हैं लोग, और वही लोग दिल के टुकड़े 1000 करते हैं। खुद पे होता है जब यकीन कुछ कम, गैर का एतबार करते हैं। एक मुलाकात के लिए कुछ लोग, एक मुलाकात के लिए कुछ लोग उम्र भर इंतजार करते हैं। शुक्रिया। दूसरी गजल है कि मुझसे मिलवाना उसे जिसको यहाँ पर सब मिला, मुझसे मिलवाना उसे जिसको यहाँ पर सब मिला, वक्त से पहले किसे किस्मत से ज्यादा कब मिला। चाहता है तू अगर मुझको तो मेरे पास आ, दिल से दिल अरमा से अरमा और लब से लब मिला।
सुंदर, बहुत सुंदर, बहुत सुंदर।
उसने दस्ताने पहन रखे हैं औरों के लिए, मुझसे तो जी खोल कर खुल कर मिला वो जब मिला। फूल राहों में बिछाए वो न आया मेरे पास, जंगलों की राह से चल कर गया वो तब मिला। ढूंढता था मैं जिसे वो था मेरे दिल में बसा, ढूंढता था मैं जिसे वो हमेशा था मेरे दिल में बसा। कब का मिल जाता मुझे लेकिन वो जाकर अब मिला।
क्या बात।
शुक्रिया। अगली गजल है कि करने से काम होगा सभी का ख्याल है,
करने से काम होगा,
करने से काम होगा सभी का ख्याल है। किसकी सहूलियत से बस इसका सवाल है, कन्वीनियंस का मामला है। किसकी सहूलियत से बस इसका सवाल है।
बहुत सुंदर, बहुत सुंदर, बहुत सुंदर।
बांधा गया न वक्त भले दर्ज कीजिए, बांधा गया न वक्त भले दर्ज कीजिए। क्या दिन है क्या महीना है और क्या ये साल है। दिल का तो हाल पूछ ही लेते हैं आप लोग, दिल का तो हाल पूछ ही लेते हैं आप लोग। दिल से भी पूछिए कभी क्या मेरा हाल है। गुजरी तमाम उम्र पता ही नहीं चला, गुजरी तमाम उम्र पता ही नहीं चला। लगता है मुझको वक्त की ये कोई चाल है।
बहुत सुंदर, बहुत सुंदर।
शुक्रिया। आखिरी गजल है कि तुझे अपना समझ कर भी नहीं अपना बनाऊंगा, तुझे ए जिंदगी हाँ उम्र भर मैं याद आऊंगा। यहाँ के शोर से दूर, यहाँ के शोर गुल से दूर, अपनी सांस की धुन पर तुझे ए जिंदगी मैं बांसुरी बनकर बजाऊंगा।
क्या बात है, बांसुरी बन।
शुक्रिया। यहाँ के शोर गुल से दूर, अपनी सांस की धुन पर तुझे ए जिंदगी मैं बांसुरी बनकर बजाऊंगा। कहाँ है तू कहाँ मैं हूँ, तलाश एक उम्र की है ये। कहाँ है तू कहाँ मैं हूँ, तलाश एक उम्र की है ये। तुझे ए जिंदगी मैं आखिर तुमसे मिलाऊंगा। बड़ा दिलचस्प किस्सा है, बड़ा दिलचस्प किस्सा है, बहुत लंबी कहानी है। तुझे ए जिंदगी मैं दास्तां अपनी सुनाऊंगा। वो इस दुनिया में हो या दूसरी दुनिया में हो, लेकिन वो इस दुनिया में हो या दूसरी दुनिया में हो, लेकिन तुझे ए जिंदगी में एक दिन जन्नत दिखाऊंगा। और आखिरी शेर है कि सितारों और फूलों से सजी एक पालकी होगी, सितारों और फूलों से सजी एक पालकी होगी, तुझे ए जिंदगी मैं एक दिन दुल्हन बनाऊंगा। शुक्रिया।
बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया पवन जी, आपने इतनी अच्छी अच्छी गजलें सुनाई। वैसे ये गजलें मोहब्बत के हवाले से थी, प्यार के हवाले से थी, महबूब के हवाले से थी, लेकिन ये इसमें पूरा कैनवस दुनिया का नजर आ रहा था। महबूब तो अलग अलग तरह से हो सकता है ना, हर किसी का महबूब अलग होता है, उसको पाने के लिए जो स्ट्रगल होती है, गोल हासिल करने के लिए, मंजिल मकसूद तक पहुंचने के लिए, तो उस तमाम जद्दोजहद का जो आपने बहुत अच्छी तरह से, बहुत खूबसूरती के साथ अगर ये कहें कि ऐलान किया है, तो ये बहुत अच्छा लगा और ये आपका ही हिस्सा है। उर्दू में आपने इस तरह की गजलें कही हैं और बहुत बेहतरीन मुझे लगी ये गजलें। मैंने पहले बहुत सुना है आपको, वो तब भी बहुत अच्छा लगा था, लेकिन इसमें जो नई नई बातें मोहब्बत के हवाले से, दुनिया की जद्दोजहद और स्ट्रगल के हवाले से आई हैं, वो बहुत अच्छा लगा। और उसमें आपका अज़्म और आपका हौसला जो है मंजिल को पा लेने का, मंजिल तक पहुंच लेने का, और मंजिल को यहाँ तक के रौंद भी डालने का एक दो जगह मुझे एहसास हुआ, ये मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगा। बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया।
Poets don't need encouragement, but then again, it really enlivens them when someone appreciates so spontaneously their poetry. So thank you, Zarina, for your little intervention here. Thank you so much. And Pavanji, one particular image where you said that it's almost like you're going to play on life like a flute. That image that you brought about there. That's a very interesting image indeed, because it has some reflections in Russian poetry. I won't want to go into all that, but it does have. Thank you so much, Pawanji. Maybe have our first Bengali poet of the evening today. Maybe have Pritha Chattopadhyay. I see that she's in the show. She was born in the historic town of Murshidabad in West Bengal, and after her graduation, she now lives in Calcutta and teaches in Calcutta. She has published in magazines like Desh, Kavita Pakhik, Kavi Sammilan, Kavita Ashram, Doinik Bajrakantha, Daily Hunt, Sahitya Ekhon, to name just a few. Her published poetry collections include, let me get it, yes, Ulki Onko Nodi Jol. So Ulki Anka Nodi Jol. She also writes short stories as well as book reviews and critiques. Over to the strategy for poetry reading in Bangla. Please, Shuru Korona.
থ্যাংক ইউ এভরিওয়ান, সবাইকে আমার নমস্কার, শ্রদ্ধা এবং শুভেচ্ছা জানাই। আমাকে সৃজন আজকের এই কবিতা সন্ধ্যায় আহ্বান করার জন্য, এবং খুব সমৃদ্ধ হচ্ছি, আমি এনরিচড হচ্ছি এত সুন্দর আলোচনা শুনে। ধন্যবাদ শ্যামশ্রী এত সুন্দর একটা প্রেজেন্টেশন দেওয়ার জন্য কবিতার এবং কবি সম্পর্কে। সবাইকে আমার শ্রদ্ধা এবং শুভেচ্ছা জানাই। আমার কবিতায় চলে যাচ্ছে, অনেকটা সময় হয়ে গেছে। প্রথম কবিতা আমার উল্কি আঁকা নদী জল। দুটি কবিতার বই আমার প্রকাশিত হয়েছে, উল্কি আঁকা নদী জল এবং পৃথা চট্টোপাধ্যায়ের কবিতা। আমার প্রথম কবিতার বই উল্কি আঁকা নদী জল থেকে আমি একটি কবিতা শোনাচ্ছি। প্রথমে, ছায়ার ভেতরে মিলিয়ে যায় এক নশ্বর আলো, অশ্বত্থ গাছের দোদুল পাতায় ঈশ্বরের মতো ছুঁয়ে থাকে শেষ বিকেলের এক টুকরো খেয়ালি রোদ। আশেপাশের গাছে ধীরে ধীরে থেমে যায় পাখ পাখালির কথোপকথন। কে কত উঁচুতে উড়েছে আজ, কত কত দূর দেশে গিয়েছিল, দেখে এলো মানুষের রকমারি সাজ। এইসব বলা বলি শেষ হয়, সবুজের আলো আনে বনাঞ্চল ঢেকে নেয় শীতল শরীর। বননন্দিনীর বুকের আগল ভেঙে ডুরে শাড়ির ভাঁজে চাঁদ আঁকে নৈরিতে সুখ। গাছেরা খুলে রাখে বাকল, বনের পাজরের গভীরে হাওয়ায় ওড়ে দাঁড়ের শব্দ। অন্ধকারে কুবো পাখি হঠাৎ ডেকে ওঠে কুব কুব, নদীতে বান আসে। আরেকটি কবিতা, সেটি আমার পৃথা চট্টোপাধ্যায়ের কবিতা, এই বই থেকে পড়ছি। এ জন্ম কৃষিকাজ। অক্ষরের নীরবতা নিয়ে পড়ে আছে অনাবাদী জমি এক, ঘাস জন্ম শীতল শিথিল, যেন কোন অনুরাসে পুরাতন অভিশাপ বয়ে চলে বোবা কালা। এমন তো ছিল না কখনো, নির্জন পালক ছেঁড়া অনুর্বরা মৃতপ্রায় দলদলে মাংসপিণ্ড আদরের মাটি। এইখানে চাষাবাদ রমণীয় গভীরে গভীর, বিগত বর্ষায় কত সচল লাঙল চষে গেছে পরম আদরে, সবুজ ধানের কোল ভরেছিল সুখ, কোজাগরি রাতে লক্ষ্মী এসে চুপি চুপি দেখে যেত কৃষকের মুখ। ভোর হলে দারিদ্রের কুনকই মাপা হতো ধান, সিঁদুর চন্দনে লেপে উপহার দেওয়া হতো গুয়া পান। চাষি বউ হৃদয়ের ছৌ নাচ খুলে রাখে, কত কথা বলা হয় ফসলে ফসলে, বৃষ্টি এসে কানে কানে ছুঁয়ে যায় মাটি, খিলখিল হাসি ধান্য রমণীর। অন্ধকার রাতে খদ্দত লিখে দেয় দুঃখ গাথা, আঁকাবাঁকা কিলক লিপিতে জনির গভীরে খুলে যায় জোনাকির পথ। এইভাবে আমার এই কবিতা, এটা 16টা কবিতা পরপর আছে, আমি সেখান থেকে 3টি কবিতা শোনালাম। আজকের আলোচনা না হলে দীর্ঘ হয়ে যাবে, অনেকেই আছেন, আমি তাহলে এখানেই থামি।
থ্যাংক ইউ সো মাচ ম্যাডাম। খুব সুন্দর লাগলো আপনার কবিতা শুনে। ওই যেখানে বললেন না যে লক্ষ্মী ঠাকুরের সঙ্গে একটা সকাশে যেন সাধারণ মানুষের সঙ্গে হচ্ছে, মধ্যে দেখা।
সবাইকে অসংখ্য ধন্যবাদ আমার কবিতা যে আপনাদের ভালো লেগেছে এর জন্য।
আপনি আরো লিখতে থাকুন। উই উইশ ইউ দ্য ভেরি বেস্ট উইথ ইওর রাইটিং। আপনি আগেও ভালো
থ্যাংক ইউ সো মাচ।
মনে করে নিন, এই আমাদের কামনা থাকবে সৃজনের তরফ থেকে। Now I kind of go back to the circle, go back to an English poet once again, and perhaps it would not be out of order to say that I'm going to the baby of this evening in terms of invited poets. Born in 1993, Rohit Trivedi is our next poet. He's made quite an impact with his anthology Fractured Reality, and he's a PhD scholar. He has taken acting very seriously. He has attended and been a part of several literature festivals, and he's even in, as he says, his bio note says, music therapy and soft skills development. But we are here to listen to Rohit's poetry today. So I saw the comments being passed, and Rohit claims that he's a big fan of Ranjit. If that is anything close, so we are going to be regaled again. Rohit, it's over to you, and let's hear your poetry this evening. Rohit, please.
Thank you so much. It's a sheer pleasure to be here amongst all the stalwarts, and with Ranjit sir, and with you, and with Mr. Basant, who has told me not to call him sir and graduate him to just with his name. This is sheer pleasure of being here. And apart from all the literature festivals, I think this is the best place where all the languages unite, where people are, disintegrated with the national language. We are all uniting with poetry. This is a beautiful place. Thank you so much. So I'll just recite my first poem. It's called a Zoo That I Call Home. In a cage, I slept because I had food and I was safe. Safe in a cage, it seemed. More safe than I could ever be. Tried to fly but failed. Tried to run but failed. So I slept as peacefully as I could be, but the sleep was never seemed to end. I woke up with a sudden jerk to light, brighter than sunlight could ever be. The light sucked me out of the cage that chained thoughts and seemingly redundant me, and made me more free than I thought I could ever be. In a cage, I slept. This is the first one. The next one is called as Anonymous Poet, and here it goes. He sat there in the darkness of a lit-up room. He sat there in the darkness of a lit-up room with eyes seeking for some recognition. I'm a poet, he would say. I'll not be judged by what you say. I will rhyme, I will repeat, I will shine with my words, I say. The laughter of the room seems only to demean those with less fortitude. The room resonated with branded beguilement as I sat there in the darkness of a little room. Anonymous quote. The second one. And this is called Teeth. The broken milk-teeth dream of past lives with family and kin. As one by one, they fall away into fairy hands. Mr. and Mrs. Wisdom weep. But another age replaced them with more permanent, rooted residents who stayed. With the blessings of wisdom, that of a certain age with fillings in their soul, they broke free. But not as lucky as the milk ones to find happiness and fairies. Thank you. So another one is, I'll just recite the last one and then say thank you. So this is the last one, which is a proper written poem, which is not recited as much. So here it goes. Anyway, vivid reality. Through the shells of childhood, some broken dreams, a less lived life, a world less seen. Some words unsaid, a smile uncurling, the silver of sustenance and enforced abstinence. Embossed a new world view on this life anew. Vivid reality. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and Anjana ma'am for inviting me and to be a part of this beautiful, beautiful session, for working so hard. And it's a sheer privilege. And being called a baby feels so nice at the age of 28. We feel back young again. It's really cute. Thank you.
You should feel like a baby.
Baby is not, Debasish, I don't think you meant baby in age. You meant baby in that wonder, in the poetry. You know,
Yes,
it's only babies who see everything with a poetic eye.
Yes.
I'm sure, Rohit, you read him wrong. He didn't mean your age. He meant the spontaneity of your poetry, which is only from a baby.
Of course. That's
so sweet. I loved every bit of it in all the ways possible. I really enjoyed it. Felt so happy when hair starts falling or whatever. This feels so nice to be young again in the world of wonder and age. Thank you.
Thank you, Rohit. That was wonderful indeed. Now we move to our second Hindi poet for this evening, Yatish Kumar. Yatish grew up in a small township in Munger, Bihar. And though he did his final schooling in science and became a mechanical engineer in the Indian Railways, his love for poetry has blossomed after 2014. He has published an anthology of poems entitled Antas Ki Kurchan, or The Soul's Urge to Reveal. So alongside all of this, he's a part of literary social organizations like Neelambar, a leading center for Hindi literature, as its president. He's also someone who is into several social upliftment programs. I think we will get a better cartouche or a better map of the personality and the preoccupations of Yatish in his poetry. I think better than a bio, his poetry will do it for us.
थैंक यू फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल मुझे इस खूबसूरत से गुलदस्ते का हिस्सा बनाने के लिए और जॉन क्रॉ रैंसम जी को स्मृति नमन करते हुए मैं अपना सीधा कविता पाठ पे आता हूँ। अंतस की खुर्चन से पहली कविता है स्त्री, शीर्षक है स्त्री। नन्ही परी का सिर सहलाता हूँ, नन्ही परी का सिर सहलाता हूँ, वह मेरी हथेली अपनी उंगलियों में लपेट लेती है। मुझे लगता है ईश्वर ने मेरा हाथ थामा है।
निशंक सोते देखता हूं जब पत्नी को, तो पृथ्वी नीम नींद सी शांत लगती है, जबकि पलकों में उसकी घर की सारी बलाएं कैद रहती है। इस समय ईश्वर नींद से गुजर रहा होता है।
क्या बात।
जब मां को सोते हुए देखता हूं तो लगता है ईश्वर नींद में भी सबके लिए उतना ही चिंतित है। जीवन में समस्त ऊर्जा स्रोत जिन जिन स्त्रियों से मिलता रहा, उनकी जागती सोती आंखों में मैंने प्रार्थनाओं से भरा स्वर्ग देखा है। ईश्वर मिथक नहीं सच है, और आपके इर्द गिर्द हाथ थामे यकीन दिलाता है कि ईश्वर कोई पुरुष नहीं होता।
बहुत सुंदर, बहुत सुंदर। यतीश जी, मुझे या तो आप आज के इस पोएट के ही अवतार हैं, एकदम हूबहू।
जी जी जी, कोशिश है, देर से आ रहे हैं और थोड़ी सी सीखने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं। बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया। जैसा कि शायद इंट्रो में थोड़ा सा चीज छूट गया कि मैं नॉवेल्स को, आई कन्वर्ट नॉवेल्स इनटू पोएट्री, दैट्स माय signature, and I have converted almost 40 novels till now. So I have selected one of the not novel, like introspection of a poet. It's called Thalchar by Kumar. So मैं उसमें से 2 कविताएं छोटी छोटी आपको सुनाऊंगा। मैंने उनके किताब को कविताओं में कन्वर्ट किया हुआ, तो उसके थोड़े से कपलेट्स सुनाऊंगा। पहली कविता है, हर आदमी के पास उसकी अपनी नदी है, हर आदमी के पास उसकी अपनी नदी है, उसका अपना वसंत और अपना पतझड़। सच यही है, अकेला होना निर्माण का अंतिम रास्ता है, और प्रकृति साथ रहती है अंतिम अरण्य तक। इस रास्ते में उसका हमसफर उसकी अपनी नींद है, इस रास्ते में उसका हमसफर उसकी अपनी नींद है, और ईश्वर का पहला काम है नींद की रक्षा, और ईश्वर हर बार हार जाता है। उनिंदे निष्प्राण संबंध रह रह कर कब्र से उठा मिलते हैं, उनिंदे निष्प्राण संबंध रह रह कर कब्र से उठ आ मिलते हैं। मेरा अकेला होना मेरा भी भ्रम ही है, यह मैं कब्र में लेटते हुए जान पाया। इसी सीरीज की दूसरी कविता पढ़ रहा हूं मैं, कि सरकारी बसों का उजाड़ लिए घूमता हूं, सरकारी बसों का उजाड़ लिए घूमता हूं, उखड़ी सांस के अंतराल में किसी और की सांस लिए घूमता हूं। यह उबड़ खाबड़ रास्ता क्या उस अधूरे मकान तक ही जाता है? मैं भी तो उस मकान सा ही हूं, न रहा जाता है न बेचा जाता है।
बहुत सुंदर, बहुत सुंदर।
सफर का भी अपना आँच है, सफर का भी अपना आँच है, पकती हुई आँच की सुलगन को छूने के लिए बढ़ता हूं, पकती हुई आँच की सुलगन को छूने के लिए बढ़ता हूं। हाथ में जली हुई रोटी आ जाती है,
हाँ।
दानवी निगाह जहां पड़ती है कालिख पसर जाती है, गांव शहर में तब्दील हो जाता है। वो बेहतर जानते हैं, वह बेहतर जानते और समझते हैं मारने और नष्ट करने का अंतर। वह बेहतर जानते और समझते हैं मारने और नष्ट करने का अंतर। दृश्य अब बुझा हुआ है आंख में जलती डिबरी को छोड़कर। अब मैं अंतिम कविता पढ़ने की कोशिश कर रहा हूं, बहुत छोटी सी है इसी सीरीज की, कि एक बदलता शहर भीतर है और बाहर भी, एक बदलता शहर भीतर भी है और बाहर भी, दोनों के तालमेल में अपने घर से बेदखल कर रही है कविता मुझे, दोनों के तालमेल में अपने घर से बेदखल कर रही है कविता मुझे। और यूं शहर के मानचित्र में मेरा घर छोटा होता जा रहा है। किसान के एक कमरे में अनाज है, थोड़ा ध्यान सुनिएगा, किसान के एक कमरे में अनाज है, दूसरे में भूसा। इससे बेहतर संतुलन कहीं नहीं और इससे ज्यादा असंतुलित कोई नहीं। मैं इसको रिपीट कर रहा हूं उसको, कि किसान के एक कमरे में अनाज है और दूसरे में भूसा। इससे बेहतर संतुलन कहीं नहीं और इससे ज्यादा असंतुलित कोई नहीं। विस्थापित से प्रमाणिक और क्या, विस्थापित से प्रमाणिक और क्या, साइकिल अगर एक कविता है तो उसके टायर में पच्चड़ की तरह एक कुंद तीर टुके मैं हूं। शुक्रिया।
Thank you, Yatish ji. Very powerful lines. Very powerful lines indeed. Sometimes it is very difficult in these readings to truly appreciate a poet's lines, because the imperative of time, one after the other. We would rather seek some time to absorb Ranjit's poetry and Yatish ji's poetry and Pawan ji's poetry. So, and all the other poets that we have heard or we are waiting to hear, Rohit's poetry for that matter, because it requires some absorption, some time, so which we don't afford ourselves. But, still, they do leave an impression, a big but cursive hand of the poet on our minds. You can feel that. So thank you again, Yatish ji. And with this, we move on to the next poet, who is again going to be a Bangla poet, a poet who hails from Bangladesh, Jewel Mazhar, who has collections called like Durji Ghore Ek Raat, Megasthenisar Hashi, and of course, more recently, Ratri O Baghini and Boshanto Rupok Hashi. So he, Basantji mentioned at the very beginning of this evening that he, someone who has translated a selection of poetry by Thomas Tranströmer, the Swedish poet, one of Basantji's great favorites, Kobita Tranströmer. It was published about 10 years ago. And then, of course, he has several awards to his, in his impressive collection of awards. The Jivanananda Das Poetry Award, the Behula Bangla Bestseller Book Award, Oihik Friendship Honor, etc., etc. He's also a very renowned critic, journalist, and translator, and the editor of the leading Dhaka-based bilingual online newspaper, BanglaNews24.com. Without further ado, it's over to Jewel Mazhar and his poetry.
I feel very, very honored and privileged to have a chance to join this wonderful, wonderful poetical session of Srijan this evening. Privileged to have the chance to get familiar with talented, wonderful poems from other languages as well as my own. Thanks for all the kind words showered upon me by Srijan and you all. I do not think I really deserve such accolades, yet my love and gratitude to you all for inviting me. I'm going to read from, first I will read in Bangla, read out in Bangla. The first poem is Megasthenisher Hashi, the green of Megasthenish. From my Nirbachita Kobita, selected poems. Megasthenisher Hashi. নিঃশব্দ কামানে তুমি একা বসে ভরছো বারুদ, শীতকাল গেল। নিঃশব্দ কামানে তুমি একা কেন ভরছো বারুদ। আমি ভাবছি মেগাস্থিনিসের হাসিও কি মেগাস্থিনিস? শক্তি চালিত এই তামাশার মধ্যে বহু বাদামি ঘটক উড়ে যায়। ইঞ্জিনের শব্দ আর রোবটের কাশি শোনা যায়। নিঃশব্দ কামানে তুমি এখনো কি ভরছো বারুদ। আবার দ্বিতীয় কবিতা রুবিকন। আমার সামনে এক রুবিকন, পুলসিরাত, ভয়ানক ক্রূর অমানিসা। এর সামনে একা আমি, কিস্তিহীন, নিরস্ব, রসধীন, পিগমিদের চেয়ে ছোট আমি। আর আমার ভাঙা হাড়, থ্যাতলানো খর্বকায় দেহের ভেতরে যত রক্ত, পিত্ত, কফ, থুতু, বীর্য, লালা সবই অসীম বরফে, হিমে, গ্রানিটের মতো ক্রমে হতেছে জমাট। আর ওই থেকে থেকে ফুসন্ত ব্লিজার্ড এক, আর এক আনক্যানি করাল হিমানি আমাকে আদ্যন্ত ঘিরে আছে। সান্নিপাতি খেত নাসিকার ছিদ্র বেয়ে, চোখ বেয়ে যে জল গড়ায় আর মাটিতে পড়ে না। শূন্য থেকে বর্ষা হয়ে শিগ্নি ঝুলে রয় যেন নর্স দেবতার। সারি সারি শত শত বল্মিকুট পেছনে আমার। তাদের আড়াল হতে জুলজুল চেয়ে থাকে লোম কর্ণ শিবা। লোল জীব, অভ্রংলিহ জিভ নাড়ে মেদুসা, মনসা আর কালী। আমার তরবারি নাই, তাই দুহাতে নখর আমার তরবারি। আমি কি ডরাবো? না, আমি ডরাবো না। অসীম হিম্মত লয়ে এক পায়ে হয়ে আছি খাড়া। কিস্তিহীন, শস্ত্রহীন, নিরস্ব, রসদহীন আমি একা। পিগমিদের চেয়ে ছোট আমি। আমি ফুঁ দিচ্ছি হাঁপড়ে আমার। আমি আমাকে বলছি, ওঠো, জাগো। আমার অশ্ব নাই। এক দূরবীনের জন্ম নিচ্ছে ভেতরে আমার। থ্যাঁতলানো ভাঙা পায়ে আমি লাফ দিচ্ছি। আমি সাঁতরে চলেছি আমার আয়ুর চেয়ে দীর্ঘ এক গন্ধকের নদী। আমি ভেদ করে যাব ক্রূর অমানিসা। আমি জয়ী হব, আমি পার হব রুবিকন। এবারে আমি আরেকটি কবিতা পড়ছি। এটির নাম হচ্ছে তন্দুরের পাশে বসে। তন্দুরের পাশে বসে হেরাক্লিতাসের নদীতে দেখো ভেসে চলেছে অটোহানের লৌহ ময়ূরেরা। সকালের রেস্তোরাঁয় দেখো টনকে টন গম দানা ফুলে উঠছে সূর্য তন্দুরের আঁচে। চাঁদের উপর দিয়ে ভেসে যাচ্ছে স্বচ্ছ সাদা মেঘ। আর স্বনির্মিত ভুট্টা বাগানের মধ্যে উবু হয়ে আছেন বিনয় মজুমদার। মনে পড়ল তাকে, যখন আত্মধিক্কারের মতো মাথা নাড়ছে ঝাউবন। পাতারা অকারণেই ঝরছে, আর দিনভর কেসে চলেছে ভূতগ্রস্ত আশ্চর্য মেশিন। কত রকম তাস উড়ছে বাতাসে। চাষা ধরা কলে ক্রমশ ভরে উঠেছে আমাদের রক্তপলিটান। আর কবি দাঁড়িয়ে আছেন জ্বলন্ত গ্যাস বার্নারের সামনে। ওহো সিলভিয়া প্লাথ, নিজেকে পড়ালে তুমি কাঁচের মতো। নড়ে উঠল ভ্রম দুর্বিপাক। যারা পেরিয়ে এসেছো বহু ট্রাফিক সংকেত, তাদের কার কি চেহারা? কে তৈলাক্ত ভুট্টার প্রচারক, আর কে নিজেরই পাখা ঠেসে ধরেছিল উনুনে। আপাতত তন্দুর থেকে কি বেরোয় দেখো, দেখো কোথায় ঘাপটে মেরে আছে ধাঁধা। লুনাটিক ইছাইলামে কে গো তুমি রয়েছ তন্ময়? কি তোমার অভিজ্ঞতা এই নগ্ন তন্দুরের পাশে? আগুন নিভল কিনা দেখো, দেখো দিনের আশ্চর্য রুটি কার দিকে প্রথমে দৌড়ায়। এবার কি আমি আমার অনুদিত দুটো কবিতাকে পড়তে পারি? ছোট।
Yes, please go ahead. Purun.
Okay. Towards a path of endless killings, there is a fear watching rows of innocent eyes. Suppose the hatred towards another explodes, but still there is inertness. A train moves in the distance. The fir tree wood trembles in waves. Come, let me tussle you in the name of the nocturnal fairies. In the magical water of senses, in melting pain-numbed flow of cards, sound of 1,000 arrows behind you, sound of 1,000 strings. Is fear then the wing of sensibility? If so, fly, fly away into the woods. Do cross the paths of endless slaughter and see what it is. There are moving stairs on the grass, shadows of skulls strewn on slopes of hills, lined up like deceptions. And just see, you are lying there, painted with fingers of water, hundreds of graffiti on the wall, like lie awake around you. The path to endless murders wraps around me and then stoops over you. This was translated by Afsan Chaudhary, a celebrated story writer, poet, and a very good translator of Bangladesh. And the last one is my own translation. It is Demon of Winter. Bangla hoche Shiter Dotto. In Bhairab, along the banks of the Meghna, I grow peanuts. Slowly and softly, I run my fingers through the white sands and feel the throb of the adorable seeds. From Kuliarchor to every nook and cranny, I send fishes and spawns as gifts. I send them to the cities that are lewd and lascivious. I trample countless wild doves and pigeons before I reach your high world cities, where even in simmering heat, our handshakes feel no warmth, as if our hands are like two dead cannons, as if inside some tattered old tents, waves of death are quailing around love. And I live in a far-off, grief-stricken, gloomy Mafashil. Upstream many a dead river, I sit and reflect across a pitiless wilderness filled with memories' ashes. From winter to winter, I shall beat up huge war drums. Once again, I shall run after your cruel, merciless armies. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mazhar. In fact, that we cannot have the entire night and the entire evening admiring your poetry and the poetry of all the other wonderful poets that we have heard this evening. You know, it's such a pity that we have to say goodbye very soon. You know, that's the really impatient thing, that we are reaching that threshold so quickly, it seems. It's just about now that we started. We had this wonderful tribute that held us to ransom, if I might put it that way. You know, so, and the ensemble cast with Basantji joining in into the reading as well of Ransom's poems, some of Ransom's poems, was wonderful. And then, of course, it started with Ranjit, and we have just come to you. So we have, as I said again, sometimes you know, these days, I really feel that there's too little time in these poetry readings. And as I said, I'm committing a crime by sitting out at the very outset, being a poet myself, someone who's been, you know, lashed to the word or married to the word, whichever expression goes better, I don't know. But to say that it's only 5 minutes or 7 minutes, you know, but still, again, I'm apologetic for that temporal kind of little hyphen in between that hurts every which way. So thank you so much once again for widening the purview of the poetry being read. The sheer range this evening is exceptional. The kind of poetry that we have been hearing, and the kind of experiences that we are being led on to, and the kind of parlance and diction that is being applied, not just because of the different languages, but even within that language, the poets that we have heard, the Bangla poets and the Hindi poets, and of course the two English poets that we have heard. Now we move to another English poet right now at this moment. It is Supriya Newar. Supriya ji has been writing consistently in several leading newspapers like Times of India, Asian Age, The Statesman, Hindustan Times, The Deccan Chronicle. Her latest poetry collection is called Kolkata Classics. She has varied interests in the world of art and music and culture. And I think rather than again me reading either a lopsided bio note or trying to sound important and intellectual, it's best that the poet takes over and has those 2 extra minutes that I might have taken otherwise, and expresses it in her own way, in her own idiom. What better than her own poetry? Supriya, please take over.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Debashish. Thank you so much, Srijan. Wonderful to be here. Basant uncle, thank you so much for inviting me. And may I just add that what's made this session even more delightful is we've had our first Kalbarsha of the season. And I had to run for a moment to shut the windows because although I love the sound of the thunder, but I'm going to read from my new book, which is called Kolkata Classics. This is what it looks like. And for just 2 short poems, really, because I know we're running short of time. For our 2 guests from Bombay, Rohit and Ranjit, the first poem is called Kumar Toli. I don't need to explain what Kumar Toli is to a single Calcuttan or anyone from Dhaka, I'm sure. But just quickly for Rohit and Ranjit, Kumar Toli is our, the potter's quarter, really. It's where all our murtis, all our devis are made. And Ranjit says he's had the pleasure of walking through Kumar Toli in October. So I don't want to take another minute. This is how it reads. Kumar Toli. Hands soiled, hands stained, seeped in earth, giving birth. Hands that carve, hands that shape, years of skill, their daily drill. Hands that chisel, hands that refine, in whose hands clay finds a shine. Hands that sculpt, hands that paint, shop after shop, in a neighborhood quaint. Hands that adorn, hands that embellish, bringing idols to life with their final polish. Lanes that have known these hands for eons, breathed devis, murtis, pots, and urns. Lanes where cheek to jowl studios abound that have seen tides turn but held their ground. Lanes that are home to these exquisite hands. Lanes that have remained rooted but traveled many lands. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Since we are on lanes, and the second poem is called By Lanes, it has a few Bengali words. I think you should be able to get it, at least the essence of it, even if not the exact meaning. And, we can't imagine Kolkata without our by-lanes. When I think about this city, I don't imagine a breezing highway. To me, the soul of this city are our by-lanes. And hence, I had to do one. Again, for our friends from Bombay, Rohit and Ranjit, the best way to explore and fall in love with the Oli-Golis, the by-lanes of Kolkata, is come in the winters and put your mobiles away and just walk around the by-lanes and get lost in the maze and grid. So this is how it reads. By-lanes, meandering and maze-like, narrow and bent, many of these lanes may look weather-beaten or spent. But if you go a nook deeper and take a leisurely stroll, you'll find timeless tales hidden in their bosom, their soul. There's a Modikhana at one end, minded by Kaku, its owner. He knows when you come down to his shop, you'll need his phone to phone her. The chawala, it seems, hardly ever rests, pouring bhar after bhar for his customers, his guests. The cigarette dukan at the corner is rarely without a bustle. Over a smoke, meet a para chele. Over a score or speech, they hustle. Under a flowering Krishnachura, a pack of cards has been shuffled. At the appointed hour, men emerge to place their bets all huddled. For the Dhobiwala, a quiet sort, this is but an everyday sight. He chooses to sing to himself as he irons away morning to night. Afternoons are more languid. A zen-like stupor descends. Only the alley cats sniff around. Near Ranna ghors they append. The slumber is broken by an animated round of cricket. A tubeless tire, a broken bottle is fashioned for the wicket. Evenings come alive with the Shondhe shank. The rickshawala makes his way, ringing his bell, his gentle dark. A couple steals a moment at the far end of the alleyway. As dawn turns to dusk, they vow to meet another day. Should you find yourself lost in this crisscross, this grid, just ask for directions of any street kid. He'll navigate you precisely to your exact location. For what is an address to you, to him is an emotion. And much after you've left these winding lanes behind, no longer you may live in them, they'll reside in your heart, your mind. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Supriya,
Thank
for
you.
those wonderful evocations of the Kolkata mazes, the North Calcutta that we do not find the time these days to explore. Really, you said putting away the mobile and all the messages and all the important things that we keep doing on that little box that is in our hands at all times, and perhaps just go up to cul-de-sacs, and quite often I've faced that experience of actually going into a cul-de-sac, thinking that I would find my lane, and I end up in a cul-de-sac. So it's a very common experience in North Calcutta. And then again, you take a roundabout, so sometimes you're all turned around, your GPS is all gone. So sometimes it is nice to have your GPS all messed up, so you recover something else comes out, something else other than GPS comes out, which I think the Almighty has endowed us all with, sometimes which we do take the liberty of forgetting. So thank you so much again, Supriya, for reminding us and for wonderfully evocating those Kolkata scenes for us and for all who are listening today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. May I just quickly add, Debashish, that the GPS offers us this wonderful tool of recentering ourselves. So sometimes you have to put away the GPS and recenter yourself, quite ironically.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Much appreciated, Supriya. We now move to our last poet for the evening, which is a Bangla poet, Sriparna Gangopadhyay. She has written for a whole host of very important Bangla magazines, literary and cultural magazines like Anandabazar, Desh, Shiladitto, Nutun Krittibash, Arambho, Bhashapad, etc. She has two very important works of poetry which she has published: Chandan Kathir Baksho, the box of sandalwood, and Lobonakto Okkhormala, the saline alphabet. She's, I think, if I'm not, I have to guess from the bio note that she's based in Shantiniketan these days, and perhaps she's joining us from Shantiniketan on this program. So it's over to Sriparna Gangopadhyay and her poetry in Bangla. Sriparna, would you please take over now?
শুভ সন্ধ্যা। আজকের এই সন্ধ্যায় কবিতা নিয়ে এমন একটি মনোজ্ঞ অনুষ্ঠানে থাকতে পেরে খুব ভালো লাগছে। ভালো লাগলো এতক্ষণ এত ভাষার কবিতা শুনলাম। র্যামসনের যে কবিতা, তার সঙ্গে আমার পরিচয় কম ছিল, সেখানেও সেই পরিচয়ও হলো। তো খুব সুন্দর একটি কবিতা সন্ধ্যা। এখানে আমাকে আমন্ত্রণের জন্য উদ্যোক্তাদের আমার আন্তরিক ধন্যবাদ। আমার কবিতা পড়ি। প্রথম কবিতার নাম দাহ। জলতলে পড়ে আছে মায়া অঙ্গুরি, তাকে ঘিরে 12 বাগ্নি জলে আমি পুরি। জলেতে আগুন নামে, মাটিতে অসুয়া, বাতাসে বাতাসে কাঁপে ধূপ গন্ধ ছায়া। ছায়ার ভেতরে আলো অনতি উজ্জ্বল, তোমার মুখেই দেখি অনন্তের ডোল। অনন্তের ছায়া পথে তারাময় রাত, তোমায় বেসেছি ভালো এই সত্যসার, বাকি সব কথকতা তঞ্চকতা ভান, অঙ্গুরি অগাধ জলে ওরে অভিমান। পরের কবিতা শব্দ। বাতাসে বয়ে যাচ্ছে শব্দ, তোমার আদরের শব্দ, তার তিরস্কার, মারণাস্ত্রের শব্দ, দোয়েলের শীষ, বাঘের থাবার শব্দ, হরিণের শুদ্ধতম স্বর, তৃপ্তির গ্রাসের শব্দ, হাওয়াতে চিৎকার। শব্দ তুলছে, কেবলই বলছে আছি আছি আছি। ভালোবাসার পাশে ঘৃণা হয়ে, ঘৃণার পাশে তৃষ্ণা হয়ে, তৃষ্ণার পাশে জল হয়ে, এভাবেই আছি চিরকাল। জলবিম্ব। ভেঙে গেছে দেওয়ালে টাঙানো আয়না, প্রতিবিম্বের টানে স্বচ্ছ জলের কাছে নীরবে দাঁড়াই। জল বলে আয়, আয় বলে চুপ করে থাকে। কাক চক্ষু জলে দেখি আমার আমিকে, কেঁপে কেঁপে ওঠে ছবি, ছবি অন্য মোনা। আয়নার প্রতিবিম্ব এমন ছিল না। নিবিড় জলের নিচে মুখচ্ছবি বলে, এই তো এখানে নীল ব্যথাগামী মন, তোমার চোখের পথে পেয়েছে ক্রন্দন। এখানে কন্দর আছে, জানো সুলোচনা, ব্যথা কোনো কাজলের আগুল মানে না। জলবিম্ব সরোবরে টলমল করে, আমাকেই ভাঙে আর আমাকেই গড়ে। আমার শেষ কবিতা এসো নিপবনে। এরপরে দেখা হোক আবার কখনো, দেখা হোক গাছের ছায়ায়, মৃদু বিষণ্ণতা মাখা নিভৃত নিরালা ছায়া, প্রহরান্ত রোদের ছোঁয়ায় ঈষৎ উষ্ণতা মেখে একলা দাঁড়িয়ে আছে। তাকে ডাকে কিশোরী সময়, নুড়ির ওপরে নুড়ি খসে পড়ে, মায়াজালে লাল নীল মাছ, ছায়া ফেলে অতীতের মেঘপুঞ্জ নবীনা নদীতে। সেই ছায়া স্রোতে ভেসে যায়। যতবার দাঁড়িয়েছি ও জলের কাছে গিয়ে, ও ছায়ার কাছে গিয়ে, তখনই কি ডাক দাও তুমি? দূর থেকে ভেসে আসে মরুত বেহাগ, বলে এইখানে বসো, কথা আছে তোমাকে বলার। এত কথা জমে থাকে মানুষের মনে, শুধু বলে শোনো তোমাকে বলতে চাই। সময়ের গা বেয়ে আমি ফিরে ফিরে আসি। আমি বলি কেন? সেই আহ্বান বলে বুঝিনি এখনো, তবুও বলতে হবে তোমাকে উজাড় করে যা কিছু জমানো। সময়ের ভাঁজ তোমাকে দেখাতে হবে, দেখাতে দেখাতে কেন বেলা নিভে যায়। আবার সময় পরে ঝরে ঝরে, সবুজাব পাহাড়ের গায়ে, পাথরে নদীতে। প্রতিধ্বনি বলে শোনো, একা এসো নিপবনে, ঘন ঘোর বৃক্ষ ছায়ায়। নমস্কার।
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. A wonderfully rendered set of poems. খুব সুন্দর। আপনার পড়াশোনা সকলের নিশ্চয়ই খুব ভালো লেগেছে, গ্রুপেও নিশ্চয়ই অনেক মেসেজ আসছে। Thank you so much for joining us from Shantiniketan and reading so wonderfully in Bangla. So we have, although we have completed our lot of invited poets, they have completed their reading. There is this idea of the last poem just does not exist, I think. I think after we have stopped and ended and we have closed our session long into the night, some poet will be reading his poetry, someone will be writing his poetry long deep into the night. So the work of poetry is never ended, will continue, and no one has the last word. Thank heavens, poetry continues. So it has been a wonderful set constellation of readings this evening. I'm truly happy and privileged to be a part of this evening. Although my job has been that of the resident Mercury. So I will now hand it back to Basant and to Boudhayan to bring a curtain down on the proceedings of this wonderful poetry art. Basant, he doesn't want me to call G. Basant. Once
Thank
again,
you, Debasish.
spring doesn't age. Spring doesn't age. So Basant, it's back to you.
No, I am truly grateful. There's no word in which I can say, Debasish, that if it were not for you, as I had written in my chat book, you would not have been able to do this poetry adda, because you were the first person who brought this together into the virtual world. And ever since then, it's indeed, I'm grateful on behalf of every Srijanite. I'm sure Uma, on her way to Spain now, who's still there with us, will agree that such a beautiful evening has been the gift of so many of the team of Srijan. And no other person to say it all than the people who have put this together. And the leader of that sort of is our friend Boudhayan. And once again, we've written everything about each of the participants in our chat book. And on the last page, of course, you will see that Boudhayan is one of our members who has been from day one, 21 years ago, when we Srijan started functioning in the year 2000. And as you all are probably aware, Ranjit and Rohit would not, but I'm sure if you have a look at our maybe anniversary program which we have put up on the YouTube, you'd know that we are a group of people who have taken part in everything, like music and theater and film and whatever is creative. We have been a part of that, and unfortunately, it has been sort of stalled because of the virus. But we are looking forward to when it eases a little and we can restart all the other activities which are not yet able to start. But in that, as I was saying, Boudhayan has been with us from day one. And he himself, as you would notice from the chat book, is a poet and a translator who does both English and Bangla. And today, the poets who have come are actually a gift from, two of them have been a direct gift from Boudhayan. And we are very glad that Boudhayan is here. Let him thank the poets who have read today. Let him thank Rabindranath Tagore, who had actually started the poetry adda, years ago, when he was the first poet who we had remembered many years ago. And then ever since then, we have been paying tribute to some poet or the other. Sometimes it's a little longish, and that pardonable maybe, but sometimes it just gets a little short. Let Boudhayan take over, please. And a formal vote of thanks from one of the oldest members of Srijan. Thank you, Boudhayan.
Every month we wait for this day as Srijan's coveted poetry meet. Poetry has always been a binding force among Srijanites and also our well-wishers who have joined online today. It bestows us with healing touch as also positive energy. For this evening's session, I thank our President, Dr. Uma Dalgupta, and Vice President, Dr. Krishna Sen, whose constant guidance and encouragement inspires us to reach better heights. I thank Shyamashri Karmakar, who had volunteered herself to pay a very fitting tribute to the American poet John Crowe Ransom, whose poems were some of the most original ever written. I also thank all the invited poets for presenting us their glittering gems in 4 different languages. My sincere gratitude to them for responding to our invitations. I thank Debasish Lahiri, a very well-known poet of English, essayist, teacher, who is a Srijanite for many years and had paid many tributes, to take up the role of a very, very good anchor this evening. He has done it marvelously, and we have managed the time also. Last but not the least, I express my profound thanks and gratitude to Srijan's poetry team, without whose unstinted support and active role we could not have made these sessions come alive. My thanks also to Dr. Sujata Das, whose back office work rolls out the digital views on every occasion. And finally, a thumping clap to the prime mover of Srijan, Basant Rungta, who spends every day of the month to arrange for this veritable feast of poetry. Stay safe, stay happy, good night, and thank that this poetry recital has brought thunder showers in Calcutta, including my locality. Okay, good night.
Thank you, Boudhayan. It was lovely because actually we were waiting for 50 degrees centigrade to happen, and I've seen several WhatsApp images of it being forecasted that there will be 50 degrees soon, because the air above us is heating up. I can sure tell you that today, of course, it may be raining outside, but our heart has heated up with the warmth with every single retire. And I do, on behalf of all of us in Srijan, I do invite you to at least call yourself a Srijanite after being with us tonight. And if you could, both Ranjit as well as Rohit, and of course Shyamashri also has our poster behind them, our background behind them. With this background, you please try and keep Saturday evenings, last Saturday of every month. If you could, you'll get the notifications now. We will not stop. But thank you very, very much. It was extremely impressive. And Supriya, we haven't heard from you for a long time. And thank you, all of you. Thank you. And once again, Uma, wish you success and conquering of Spain from all of us. Thank you very, very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good night.